Ed Powell from Powell and Powell, representative, to come and speak with us regarding opioids crisis that's going on and the legal ramifications and whatnot. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here today. I am Ed Powell. I'm an attorney down in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Gary Whitaker, another attorney in Winston-Salem, is working closely with me on this project, and I'll tell you a little bit about the history and background of who we are and what we can do to help the county in this terrible situation that you have with opioid problem nationwide. Gary and I are part of a North Carolina group of local attorneys that a group of national attorneys has hired to work with counties and cities to make sure that we have communication constantly concerning any litigation that we have filed for you, and help and assist you and answer your questions ongoing. This is not just something where we'd come up today and you won't see or hear from us again. We have been retained by these 6 law firms. One firm is out in Dallas, Texas, and has offices in other cities. Another firm is in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Another firm is in Pensacola, Florida. And then we have 3 other firms in Charleston, West Virginia, and Huntington, West Virginia. And as some of you who have studied this problem pretty intently will know, the West Virginia is kind of the ground zero of the problem with opioids in this country. And there was a 60-minute show back in October, and then again, I believe it was in January or February of this year, telling what happened and millions of prescriptions that were being doled out by a pharmacy in a town of about 2,000 people up in West Virginia. And that kind of spread from there to other places, and you have seen the problem firsthand here in Allegheny County. You have seen the cost of the problem, both in human lives, human suffering, and in monetary outlay by the taxpayers of Allegheny County. You've seen it particularly in some of the agencies that we just saw and you honored this morning. And that is the Sheriff's Office, the EMS, and you also have a very serious part of the problem is in your social services. I am the county attorney down in Yadkin County and have been for about 6 years now, and been working very closely with the kind of problems that you have had. And we have learned a lot. Gary and I have in these last 7 or 8 months. It's been since we were contacted to be a part of this litigation team. Our group has worked with counties from Manio to Murphy, literally. We now have 49 counties in North Carolina have either signed up or have filed suit with our law firm consortium.
How many?
49. And we also have cities, 7 municipalities that have signed up, being Winston-Salem, Wilmington, Jacksonville, North Carolina, and other cities like that. Close by, you have Wilkes County, who's already filed a lawsuit that we represent, and we're working closely with Ashe County and other counties all around here, Surrey. We've already filed their lawsuit. We've filed lawsuits for Burke nearby. In fact, that's how I came to be here today. Mike James was down at, the county manager was down at Yadkin for a regional meeting of the NCACC, and maybe some of you were there. And the Burke County Vice Chairman, Johnny Carswell, some of you probably know him, introduced me to Mike, and and told him he ought to hire me. So I was very pleased that one of our satisfied clients said that, and Mike and I talked about it a little bit and have followed up with Donna, your county attorney, since then, and trying to make sure that we come and answer your questions and try to explain to you what we're trying to do. As we say, we're the boots on the ground, I guess you would say, for the law firms, such that you will be able to contact Gary or me anytime you need us, any questions you have if you decide to hire us. And what has happened is that we have filed throughout the nation around 300 and some lawsuits. I think it's about 350 that our law firm consortium has filed so far. And all of these opioid lawsuits have been consolidated under one judge in Cleveland, Ohio. Some of you may be aware of that. And this judge has done what's called a multi-district litigation. That is where they've consolidated all the cases in every county and city in the United States, and the federal government is all in front of Judge Dan Polster. And he's a judge in Cleveland, Ohio, and they first had their first MDL, we call it multi-district litigation, meeting in December. And wasn't long after that meeting started that he laid the law down, literally, to the attorneys who were there. There were several hundred attorneys there from around the country. And he said, we're going to resolve this issue. This is a very bad crisis throughout the country. And we're not going to sit around and let you lawyers expand and spend years and years on litigation preliminaries, such as just what we call discovery and things like that. I'm going to shorten that time frame greatly, because we're not going to do this like y'all would handle any regular case where you got these multi-$100 an hour lawyers and they're churning the files. He was very frank about all this, and he has said and has set case for trial next March in Cleveland. He said, but more important, we're going to try to settle this matter. We're going to have, starting next month, we're going to have settlement discussions. And frankly, we were very pleased that they set up an executive committee of plaintiffs' attorneys, and 5 of those 22, I believe there are in the executive committee, 5 of those are members of our 6 law firms. In fact, there are 3 lead plaintiffs' attorneys that are leading the entire discussion with Judge Polster, and we have one of those, Paul Farrell from Huntington, West Virginia. And so we're in the know, I guess you would say, about what's going on in the MDL, but more importantly, we're in the operative mode where we're doing something about it and trying to work discussions. Judge Polster has, in the last few weeks, issued an order of the federal court saying that we will receive what's called the ARCOS data, which is the data that's kept by the Drug Enforcement Administration. Back in 1970, the Congress passed the Controlled Substances Act, and they regulated the distribution of legal drugs and the punishment categories for illegal drugs. And Drug Enforcement Administration was created by that act, and one of their duties was to set up a licensing procedure for distribution of the controlled substances legally. And what the law said was you cannot have sales from the manufacturer directly to the hospitals, doctors, or pharmacies. The sales must go through distributors. And DEA was charged with the legal responsibility to enforce this and to license these people, and to, more important, their job was to monitor them and make sure that these kind of things that have happened didn't happen. And the ARCOS data contains this information about how the little town in West Virginia, about 2,000 people, could distribute millions of prescriptions a year. Obviously, there's something gone well wrong here, and that somebody has dropped the ball and has created this kind of problem. And we in the lawsuit, in our complaint that we file for other counties, and if you would show us if you would be so gracious as to hire us to represent you, that your lawsuit would also be very similar, except there'd be specific information in there about Allegheny County. But our lawsuit is about 160 pages long, and it goes into great detail about the legal problems that have been created by the manufacturers and by the distributors. 3 of the distributors out of the 800 that are licensed have 85% of the business of distributing opiates in this country. Let me say that again. 3 distributors have 85% of the entire opiate distribution business in this country. They also, in 2016, had gross revenues of over $450 billion, B-boy, dollars. Some of these 3 distributors are ranked in the top 10 corporations in America. And we're probably the most least known corporations in the country by the mass public in this country. One of the others is in the top 20 in size in this country. And one of the reasons is because of the massive distribution and improper distribution and fraud that's been committed by the manufacturers and the distributors. If you watch that 60-minute, either one of those 60-minute shows, there were some very great details in there about what the fraud was by former members of the DEA. We now have, I believe it's 2 of the former DEA employees as our expert witnesses, and they're working for our law firm consortium full time. We're in this to win. We're in this to do the right thing and to bring these people to justice, and that's what we are well on the road toward doing. And I've got Gary Whitaker here. We'll go into more details about this, but we will both be available after our presentation for questions by all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My name is Gary Whitaker, and I practice law in Winston-Salem. I have a litigation practice, so that means I go to court. I was introduced to this litigation about 8-9 months ago. I'll just tell you, when I read what I call the white paper on it, I immediately thought, this makes sense. Why didn't I think of it myself? Put it down, handled some other matters, and came back to it 2 days later and read it again and said, there needs to be activity on this in North Carolina. And I, along with Ed Powell, had been requested to provide some help in it, and began to work on it. And we were requested by this national consortium to do that. I really appreciate the fact that you have invited us here today to talk to you about why Allegheny County would be a suitable litigant or plaintiff in the case. So I want to ask you to take a look at that first page of the handout, and you will see that this is a graph and a map from the North Carolina Division of Mental Health Controlled Substances Reporting System for 2016. And it shows Allegheny County as listed as having a prescription opioid pill rate for outpatient patients of 88.5 scripts per 100 persons. So what that means is that for every man, woman, and child, just in 1 year in 2016 in Allegheny County, there were at least 88 prescriptions for opioids. For every man, woman, and child, for every 100, they had 88% prescriptions. Now, the national average and the state average is well under that at 66. Now, I personally think that 66 is too high anyway, but that's just a personal point of view. So, as a result of that information, I would tell you that in terms of your prescription rate being well over the state and national average, this is a county that has a lot of opioid prescriptions being dispensed in it. Now, opioids don't follow a boundary. So you could be receiving opioids from other counties that are coming in. There's no way to know that. But this is the dispensation rate. If you take a look at page 2, I provide a little bit of internal publicity in this packet from an article from The Guardian back in February, and I highlight some things that I think are important from comments made by Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, when the federal government decided that they wanted to file their statement of interest in this very MDL that we have petitioned for, obtained, and started. On page 3, I highlight this quote, and I think it's very important. The hardworking taxpayers of this country deserve to be compensated by any whose illegal activity contributed to these costs. So what are these costs? Sessions said the opioid crisis cost the U.S. an estimated $115 billion in 2017 and has cost $1 trillion since 2001. Over the next 3 years, the crisis is expected to cost an additional $500 billion. Specifically, on page 5, and I'll raise this up so you can see that spreadsheet, the Excel spreadsheet there. This is reporting directly from the North Carolina Department of Health, and it shows all intense opiate poisoning deaths by county. Third county listed is Allegheny. The first half of the list from the survey period 1999 to 2007, Allegheny County unfortunately experienced 3 opiate poisoning deaths. But since that time, Allegheny County experienced 16. I think you know that is more than 4 or 5 times in the second half of this survey period. So Allegheny County has been hit hard by this opioid and opiate epidemic. Our case maintains that the county and its taxpayers have suffered a public nuisance, and we're proceeding under Chapter 19 of the North Carolina General Statutes. We contend that it's occurred as a result of negligence on the part of both pharmaceutical defendants and opioid distributor defendants. Take a look at page 6, if you would, in the packet, and you will see that in the region that Allegheny County is a part of, commonly prescribed opioid medications have contributed to 92 deaths just in this period of time, 1999 to 2016. If you go to the next page, page 7, it's specific to Allegheny County. And of course, the numbers are less, but you can see that the commonly prescribed opioid medication is the highest causative factor in those deaths, at 2 in 2016. How did we get here? I mean, how did this country get here to where we've got such a big problem with opioids? Well, the president, on page 8, the President's Commission on Combating Drug Addiction and the Opioid Crisis attempts to address a lot of factors involved in this. And I've taken some excerpts just to try to highlight how we did get here. On page 9 of President Trump's Commission on the Opioid Crisis, there's a little history here about how opioids were used effectively and beneficially in the Civil War. However, by 1900, 1 in 200 people were addicted to opioids, even in our country. And so there was a reaction to that. There was a congressional legislative reaction to that. And I highlight on page 10 that the United States government in 1906 had to pass the Pure Food and Drug Act, and then the Opioid Exclusion Act, and then the Harrison Act of 1914, which taxed and regulated the sale and distribution of opium. So we went for quite a long period of time through 2 world wars, and then there was a problem again, occurred in the 60s. And in some of the conversations that I've had with members of the medical community, there was actually kind of a problem with heavy prescribing of opioids in the 60s. So what did the government do? The government passed the Controlled Substances Act in 1970 and set up a special arrangement to create a middleman. And the middleman were the opioid distributors, and their primary function is to safely warehouse and ship between pharmaceutical manufacturers and pharmacists opioids. They ship opioids, that's what they do. And Mr. Powell, Ed, just mentioned that 3 of those distributors hold 85% of the market share and $450 billion in annual revenues just in 2017 alone. Well, in return for that registration privilege, they are required to report every single order, but also to report suspicious orders, which can be anything from a 10% increase in volume from 1 month to the month, from 1 month to the last month, within a single dispensary or pharmacist point of distribution. We say that has not occurred. Why? Well, for one reason, the largest of those 3, McKesson Corporation, just 2 or 3 years ago, paid a $150 million fine to the DEA, and in return for paying that fine, and it was over the issue of whether or not they properly reported suspicious orders, in return for that, the ARCOS database never saw the light of day. That same database that Mr. Powell indicated we're seeking the discovery of in this litigation. So I point all that out to bring to bear a little bit of the history, and you'll see on page 12 highlighted that the commission, President Trump's commission, found that 1 pharmaceutical company sponsored over 20,000 educational events for physicians and others on managing pain with opioids, claiming their potential for addiction was low. And again on page 13, I highlight the high prescription rate for Allegheny. Allegheny County is what we refer to from this data from the Center for Disease Control as a red county. So what does that equate to? I believe the population here is approximately 10, 11,000 citizens. So what does that equate to? Well, on page 14, North Carolina Department of Health also provides some data on that. So in 2016, according to the information available, 959,521 opioid pills dispensed in the county. Now let's go back to the beginning of that survey period, 2011, on the far left. 683,502. So which way is the epidemic going? It's going up. I think you can follow the rest of the data in the packet. I would just point out on page 17 that it is estimated that the total lifetime costs, and I'm not suggesting this, that the county is suing for these costs because these are also business and family-related costs through lack of income. The total work loss cost in Allegheny County in 2016 are projected by the North Carolina State Center for Health Statistics at $2.5 million. And I believe I've heard that the county budget it runs in the $17 million range. But see, your business community, the working community, is estimated to be losing $2.5 million due to this epidemic. So why are we focused on these defendants? Take a look at page 18. Our group is suing three main distributors: AmeriSourceBergen, Cardinal Health, and McKesson Corporation. And this is the page that I'm referencing, page 18. On the far left column is one category of defendants, those distributors that have that special registration with the federal government. AmeriSource in 2017 had a $153 billion revenue. When you look at all the manufacturers of opioids combined that we are including in our as defendants in our suit, their total was $180 billion. So AmeriSourceBergen alone almost equates to all of the manufacturers. But then look at McKesson Corporation, almost $200 billion in 2017. So naturally, we think that at the top of the chain of this whole problem, the distributors who had a duty by law to report suspicious orders, and we contend they failed to do it properly. Had they done it properly, surely somewhere along the line of that period, 1999 to the present day, someone would have made note, someone would have reacted to it, and someone would have said within the medical community, within the pharmacist industry, we have a problem. We have way too many opioids hitting the streets for whatever reason. And the whole point of reporting suspicious orders is to prevent opioids from being diverted into illicit hands and misuse and abuse, which leads to the problems with addiction. Now, I've emphasized opioid-related deaths, but one of the biggest problems is just the addiction rate. And the addiction rate in North Carolina went up 40% during the most recent reporting period, because it's the addiction rate that affects those work-life costs. On page 19, we point out and highlight the actual members of our consortium. We are, at this point in time, I would tell you we are the dominant group within this MDL. And the last page shows, it actually leaves out one county. Lincoln County is now on board. So we are very serious about this litigation. I have a packet that I'll make available to you. It goes into some detail about the causes of action. It goes into some detail about the national consortium in terms of the biographies on these firms that are highly specialized in this litigation. I'll leave that with you and ask that if you have any questions, please let us know.
I'll discuss fees and things. We're going to discuss that in closed session. Okay. While you're passing that out, I have a few things I want to put out. Mr. Powell referenced West Virginia County. This county of 2,900 population received 21 million pills over a 10-year period. Now, that's pills, that's not prescription. So if you do the math and back it up to a 30-day prescription, which I understand North Carolina doesn't even allow currently, I think I'm right.
7 days under the new law.
Yeah. So that, on a 30-day prescription, that's still 700,000 prescriptions for a town of 2,900 people. So gross negligence on the policing of the prescriptions would sound like. The other part is that on the manufacturers have, I think, misled folks grossly on the addiction rate.
It's an issue.
I mean, highly. I mean, the information that they had versus what they were giving out whenever they started these prescriptions
Totally defrauded.
didn't marry up to each other. And so in those two areas, the rate of prescriptions, and then of course the misinformation about the and on Facebook, I'm actually a member of a private group who consist of folks who are victims and addicted to drugs, opiates. And the reason I got on that is because whenever I started getting this information and started seeing this stuff, it's like, I mean, it's mind-boggling at what's gone on in this. But then you read some of these, I mean, it's destroying people's lives. Not just, the underachievers, it's doctors, lawyers, positive contributors of society. There is, it knows no bounds. It's affecting everyone. You go in for any kind of a procedure, and within just a day or two of taking these, you could become addicted to them. And so I just wanted to put that out there just for the public's comment. And there's all kinds of information for anybody that wants to go out and see it. I'm not interested myself, and probably this board is not, in receiving a big amount of money. I'm interested in what the judge said. We need some results. We need to do something at the street level, because we've got some folks sitting back here that deal with this on a daily basis and see lives that are just being destroyed. So, that's part of the process. I understand that. That's how you get attention. But I'm very hopeful that there's not going to just be money's changed hands, but there is actually going to be a fix implemented that's going to matter to people's lives in Allegheny County and anywhere else. The other thought is, there's been questions, and I know we'll go into this in probably closed session a little bit, but for the public's information, why would the county sue versus the state? Because I know there's been some conversations and questions regarding that, and I'd just like for you to elaborate on the reason, the benefit.
Yes, sir. I think that's an excellent question, and we think we have a good answer for that. Tobacco litigation is kind of an example of what happens when you have a large entity like the state handling the money. And of course, they set up a foundation, if you will, to distribute this money, and it's little bits and pieces over a lengthy period of time, and hardly ever see any results from it. What we have here, and that's our model, and we have gone forward with that and are going to continue that model, and that is that each county and each municipality who is our client has their own lawsuit. You have your own lawsuit with your own damages, and when at the end of the day, whether we try it or whether we settle it, the money comes to Allegheny County. And there's another good statement you made a moment ago, Mr. Chairman, was about the funds. We have a three-pronged approach to that, and we have, we'll go into all that in more detail, but it's basically education and treatment and law enforcement that we divide those aspects to. But you, in behalf of your citizens, make the final decision on what you want to do. You're going to be receiving the funds, for lack of a better way of doing it. Money is the only way that we can resolve this issue, and then you decide how to spend that money and how to properly handle it going forward. We're going to work with you in regard to your damages. We'll give you a model for your staff to work up from the model what your damages are. And that's part of our responsibilities in going forward. Once we file the lawsuit, we work with your staff to help decide what your damages are. So if we do get to the point where we're going to have a resolution, the resolution will not be a class action. The tobacco litigation settled about 15 years ago was a class action. And that is that all the money went into one pot and then it gets distributed out. Here, the money's not going that way. The money's going to come to Allegheny County and you're going to get it. You make the decision. You decide. You're the elected officials. You decide, in working with your citizens, what they want, what they need, and do what's in their best interest, just like you do any other issue that comes before you. And we think that's the best way to do it, and that's the way we're handling it, and that's the way it will be handled. So it's a far different process than a class action is not the way to go. And the state has filed a suit in the last couple of weeks that basically is trying to get injunctive relief to stop certain kinds of activities from occurring. And that's what they've done. And we think we've been working closely with the Attorney General's office and communicating and that sort of thing. The state has their own set of damages, yes, but you have your own set of damages, and we think never the twain shall meet. We think you should get your damages. You make the decision. And so we think that it's far better than having the state say, then it comes through the legislature and the rich get richer, poor get poorer. And that's not in the best interest of rural counties.
At the state level, and what they're doing basically would be kind of working in harmony with what the counties are trying to do. So
we're very hopeful that we have no guarantees.
I know, but I mean, that's kind of the track that we're trying to go down.
Yes, sir.
In other words, we don't want to be fighting the state.
No, not at all.
We're working towards the
we're
local
working
need
together
at
as best we
whatever's
can.
best
Yes, sir.
from the state level or from the county level.
Yes, sir.
Talking to General Counsel for the Attorney General, I asked a specific question about 6 weeks ago. This is not a confidential discussion per se. I just said, during this discovery matter, if you're in this MDL and we're in it during the discovery phase and we work up our damages, we're going to be cooperating with each other, aren't we? And the answer I got was, yes, we're going to be cooperating with each other. And I'm holding him to that because I take him at his word.
That's fair enough. I got one final question, and then if others have questions.
Sir.
As I have seen public meetings from other counties that have gotten on board, and I know we'll be discussing fees and whatnot, but fees only come with results, is what I understand.
That's correct.
With other counties would be.
Well, I'll go on and explain that now, if you'd like, then we'll discuss it in closed session as it relates to your situation. But our contract provides for a 25% contingency fee. Contingency fee means that you pay zero if you get zero. And if you settle on your terms, how you want to do it. Of course, we will make recommendations to you based on the knowledge and experience on what we have, and as well as what the facts and the law are as we go forward. But it'll be your final decision, just like it is with any client that we represent, to make the final decision. Yes, I'll take this, or no, I want to go to trial. And we're certainly ready to do that. And we have skilled attorneys working with these 6 firms that in the hundreds that have experience and very good experience in billion-dollar results. And so, these are the kind of things we're talking about. This settlement will be in a very large number. Like the tobacco settlement was about $250 billion dollars. And we think this will be greatly in excess of that for the country, because this problem is far more extensive than the problem with nicotine and tobacco usage. And it's far more harmful, far more damaging. Not saying that just as a man who came from tobacco country down in Winston-Salem, but I just think, I think the facts bear that out. But there are expenses involved in this kind of litigation, as you might imagine, and those will be borne by the attorneys. The contract will provide in the 25% contingency fee, and that the expenses will be paid in advance by the attorneys. If you recover, the expenses will be recovered back like they do normally in any lawsuit litigation. The attorneys will get that money in addition to the litigation the agreement of 25%, and that's just standard practice throughout the profession, that if you advance the cost of court and the expenses of the litigation, which we will. In other words, Allegheny County, in order to file this lawsuit, will have no expenses whatsoever, nor will they have any expenses whatsoever to taxpayers going forward unless you settle the case to your satisfaction. In that event, you'll pay 25% attorney's fees, and you'll pay reimburse the expenses as detailed back to you by the law firms.
Open it up, Bob.
Just a couple of quick questions. So right now you have 49 counties that have signed on with your firm.
In North Carolina, yes.
In North Carolina. That's almost, we're just shy of half.
Yes, sir.
And 6 or 7 municipalities.
Yes. I think 9 now. Oh, he said 7, excuse me. Okay.
Okay. Now, are all opiates bad, or is there legitimate use for some opiates?
We're talking about legitimate use of opiates. That's what we're talking about. Controlled sales through proper prescriptions and proper distributions. That's the only thing we're talking about. We're not talking about illegal drugs here. We're talking about legal prescriptions.
So at some point in these big numbers,
Yes, sir.
a doctor has prescribed these pills for the patient. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Will the doctors be part of the litigation?
Some few lawsuits have added doctors to the litigation. Frankly, it is such a burden of proof that we think it's a high hurdle to be able to prove that. And so we're not suing any doctors. Our consortium of law firms is not, because we think the burden is just too high to try to prove which doctor did what. And I think you lose sight of the whole goal, and that is that if you control the problem by resolving it by trial or settlement through the manufacturer and the distributors, then you're going to stop the doctors as well. And of course there are some. There are some doctors around the country that have been culprits in this, who have profited and benefited and who defrauded their patients. But most of that has come, we have found, from the defrauded information that's been provided to the doctors by the pharmaceutical manufacturers, by saying, particularly like he said, that these drugs were way back, they were saying, oh, you can take one every day for your arthritis and that kind of thing. They're not addictive, when they knew they were. And that's one of the bases of our lawsuit, is that kind of statement.
That was my question. I was concerned about how this would affect our local physicians, our pharmacists, our health department. And so if I understand it right, you said sign up or a lawsuit. I'm not sure if that's one and the same.
Yes, sir.
And so this is going to be geared toward the distributors
And the manufacturers.
and the manufacturers.
We sue about, 22 defendants, I think there are. And those are spelled out in the caption of your lawsuit.
Anticipating Commissioner Irwin and Commissioner Smith with those important concerns or questions. Take a look at page 12 of that handout, if you would. I think that good doctors have been misled and duped. Dr. Michael Fagan of the Mountain AHEC, the Area Health Education Center, has gone to various groups throughout the state and commented about that. In President Trump's commission, you'll see unsubstantiated claims at the top there. I'm just going to read this. One early catalyst can be traced to a single letter to the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, published in 1980, that was then cited by over 600 subsequent articles. And the headline was "Addiction Rare in Patients Treated with Narcotics," which was a flawed conclusion of a 5-sentence letter. If you'll read on through there, you'll see how that one letter was conflated. It was conflated by the industry that wanted to keep making it appear that opioids were not as risky as they are. And it's my view that physicians have been misled for quite a period of time about the risk associated with long-term opioid prescribing. I think that that recognition is now taking place. Hence, you have the North Carolina STOP Act, that if it's in non-palliative, non-acute care, it's a 7-day prescription, and you have to come back. You know, the doctor can write it for 30, but you're going to have to come back to the pharmacist after 7, if that's being followed. So when you overstate the benefits and understate the risk, and you trivialize or deny the risk, which we say the pharmaceutical industry did, it's a slippery slope for the doctors, because they get the same reports. Those reports go into their journals, and they don't have time to go out and conduct their own studies to fight that, even if they suspected it might have some invalidity to it. So this is sort of how this is developed, and it's our position, our group of attorneys, our consortium, that has the 49 counties that we are representing in North Carolina. We believe that the doctors have been misled. And we believe that if you go to the top of the chain of this problem, where it first started, that's where you need to be. Because if the reporting of suspicious orders had occurred, that potentially, if a suspicious order had been properly reported, potentially it would have ensnared possibly a pharmacist or a doctor who was really way off the rails. So we're not suing doctors, and we're not suing pharmacists either. We're going to the source.
Thank you.
I guess most of my questions will probably be in a closed session, but, you know, and I respect what you're saying about the doctors, but I understand a lot of money crossing hands to doctors to do seminars, do speeches, obviously to support the distribution of the medications. So something has to slap those hands, because the ones that do the marketing of it, the ones that go out to the physicians, and, you know, I don't think doctors are that stupid to believe that these things are not addictive. And I think somewhere that needs to be tackled, whether it's through this or something else. But you've got all these lobbyists that make a fortune off of this medication, and those people are not being attacked in this.
Mr. Prince, I don't argue the point that you need an entire toolbox to work through this problem. You need government intervention. The North Carolina General Assembly passed the STOP Act. That's some. The federal government is sending to states funds to try to create reduction in the opioid use. There is no question, but it takes many tools in the toolbox. I just respectfully describe to you what our tool is, which is seeking compensation that goes to Allegheny County for Allegheny County to use as it believes it should use if it receives the compensation. And we believe we have an effective way to be successful, and it does not include trying to find a doctor in Allegheny County that might be culpable. Now, if that is a, in terms of a right and wrong argument, not perfect, can't disagree with you. It's probably not perfect, but I believe it's going to be more effective in taking this approach.
The only question that I have is on the facts and figures that you're presenting. Allegheny County has one of the highest percentage of veteran population in the state. I was medically retired. Are you counting the prescriptions that are given to disabled veterans in these figures? Because if you are not, your figures are way low.
It's a question I cannot answer directly.
That is one concern, and it's simple. My experience with the VA is not the best in the world. They hand out Percocet like chiclets. To me personally, I can speak of that. I live with pain every day. If you are not tracking that in this region, and I don't know how you would do it because we go to Johnson City, we go to Salem, Virginia, we go to Kernersville, but your numbers are way low. Whenever you consider a population in a county of less than 11,000, over 11.5% are made up of veterans, many of which are receiving disability benefits. So that may be a question you want to ask.
Thank you.
And track that. Thank you.